Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel, and in this episode we're going over something rather interesting, and that is when subskills don't trump species. Now, if you guys have followed the channel for a while, you'll have known that for the longest time I've made a general statement of subskills trump species, and that is this idea that if two Pokemon do the same thing, but one has better subskills than the other, it doesn't matter what their base stats are, it doesn't matter how good or bad the species is. Generally speaking, the subskill difference is more powerful than the difference between the species, and that generally is true for the game. While one species may be worse than another, your individual experience is going to be different because the different subskills are going to matter far more than the species difference for that role. And to just illustrate this idea, now, for those of you that don't know, that's the entire thesis that the Sleepers, my Sleep Sleepers series, was founded upon. I actually started the Sleep Sleepers to try and prove that concept by restricting myself to only worse Pokemon, to nothing that's the best of anything. And overall, I would say that I think I've proved the concept pretty well thus far. Although there have been some hiccups in some ways, and I have also proved that it is not always the case. And in this video, I wanted to go over when that is not the case, and when, based off my experience running the Sleep Sleepers, even when you have a restricted spawn pool, there are still certain Pokemon that just you can't justify. And just to demonstrate the concept of subskills is better than species. Just for example, I pulled out all the tomato farming ingredient specialists in the game, ranging from Luxray to Dugtrio, for the mono list, that is. I don't know why they gave us so many mono tomato farmers, but they did. Anyway, you can see here that the difference ranges from Luxray with 94.69 to Dugtrio with 77.25 when giving them ingredient finding M. With my personal background settings, this may vary from account to account. But either way, we can see here that if I was to just bump it to this little example here, you give that Abomasnow Helping Speed S, you give the Victory Bell Helping Speed S, they're producing more than what the Luxray is. You give the Mime Helping Speed S and a Speed Up Nature, which really, in the grand scheme of things, isn't really that much. It also, or the Dugtrio, both of them. You give them Helping Speed M and a Speed Up Nature, or Helping Speed S. Dugtrio does need Helping Speed M, but you give them that, and they do outperform the Luxray, despite the difference looking quite large here. So really the concept is, it's going to vary from account to account which Pokemon is good. If you are someone who needs tomatoes, and you catch this Luxray and this Dugtrio, I'd probably suggest investing this Dugtrio more, because then you can leave Luxray open to do something else, and you can use Dugtrio then instead. And you caught better subskills, this is the better Pokemon. Now, where are the situations in this game the way this is not the case? And I will say this is also kind of a message of like saying, these Pokemon need buffs, because this shouldn't be the case. Subskills should always trump nature, or subskills in nature should always trump species. It is wrong if that's not the case, and there are a few situations where that is. And the first one that I wanted to touch on is with Dream Shard farming. Now, it'll come to no surprise if I've talked about Swalot extensively on this channel and Dream Shard farming and what it looks like and the state of Dream Shard farming, but if you look at some of the comparisons in front of you on the screen right now, you'll understand it when I say that Dream Shard farmers are a category of Pokemon that really subskills do not trump species, and I'll go through and explain this step by step. So, Swalot here. Now, the way that I determined if a species overall is worth it is potentially having subskills trump species is if the Pokemon, if I can give it the best potential subskills for whatever job it's trying to do. So like in this case, Persian and this Halloween Hat Pika, you can see I've given the best potential subskills for skill triggers per day. If it is outperformed by another Pokemon that does the same thing, but with what I consider the bare minimum investable subskills. Now, what the bare minimum investable is really can vary from account to account, because for me, I've always seen it as Skill Trigger M and Help Speed M on Skills Specialists is the bare minimum investable. Now, the entire reason why I come out with this is because this isn't really that difficult for me as a premium player to accomplish. With the access to Subskill Seeds, This is a pretty common spread. I can, if I'm long-term hunting something, I can usually expect to get something that looks like this within the first 10 to 15 catches, I'd say. Probably even sooner. I don't know what the actual math is on that. I didn't run it through how many more. But it's not all that rare to invest in something like this, and I consider that the bare minimum investable. Doesn't mean it's good, doesn't mean it's something I'm excited to invest in. No, it's just the minimum that I consider investable. Once again, that can also be different from if you're newer, you might want to invest something that has worse off subskills because it's the best that you have. But for later gameplay, that's what I consider to be bare minimum investable for skill trigger M, or for skill specialists. So if we look at the bare minimum investable Swalot with skill trigger M, help speed M, it's producing roughly 17,000 dream shards per day. Sableye is not that far behind it, so Sableye I think can be a reasonable investment. It's probably not a reasonable hunt because it is a 16-pip Pokemon, and it takes an extra main skill seed, and it is net worse than Swalot, but if you stumble into a good one, it's a reasonable investment if you get a good one. Lucario is a bit more behind. As you can see, in order to get to comparable Dream Shard quantities, I had to give it an additional skill trigger S. But overall, it's still achievable to get comparable numbers to what Sableye and Swalot can offer. And it's a bit more common at certain islands, like, I believe it's at Lapis, because it's a fighting type. Meanwhile, these guys are pretty much only at either Greengrass and Top or Top exclusively. Meanwhile, this guy I know can also spawn at Snowdrop, if I'm right. So, there's a bit more... whichever one of these three you stumble into first is probably the one that you'd be best to invest. Lucario is a little bit worse, but it's going to take a higher level of sub-skills to be competitive with the Swalot. But Swalot's still the king, obviously. The two situations where I'd say absolutely it doesn't matter the sub-skills, because you're just going to get a better Swalot if you just spend a little bit of time hunting Swalot. Holiday Hat Pikachu and Persian. I'm so sorry if anyone has invested these, but as you can see here, this Holiday Hat Pika, I gave it a skill trigger up nature, I gave it skill trigger M, skill trigger S, help speed M. The best potential array of sub-skills currently available to us in the game. And yet, it's still being outperformed by Swalot. Granted, it's kind of comparable to these two, but these two are actually like reasonable hunts. You can catch something like this. I guess if you do stumble into literally this exact Holiday Hat Pika, maybe it's not the worst investment. But it's just that this is so much easier to catch, and it does better. And it has a level of evolution for a free main skill seed. So overall, I don't think that's worth it. But then the real offender is Persian. My goodness, you can see here 14,580 with the best potential sub-skill spread. I even thought, okay, let's give it more frequency boost by taking it all the way up to the theoretical level 100. If you take it up to level 100, it is still outproduced, and give it a maxed out 2,000 hour sleep ribbon, it still is outproduced by the Swalot. So, Holiday Hat Pika and Persian, I just genuinely can't justify investment into no matter what the sub-skills are. At least not for Dream Shards. As for other regards, they're skill specialists at their core. Whatever they're trying to do outside of that is probably better done by something else. Apple productivity, electric berry productivity, normal berry productivity, or milk. Any of those things going to be done a lot better by something else. Now, I also did want to mention Honchkrow here. Now, this isn't a slam on Honchkrow, because Honchkrow does something different. It has Super Luck ingredient draw. So it produces a lot of ingredients with its main skill. But I just wanted to show off here. If you're relying on Honchkrow as your Dream Shard farmer, it is not an effective investment for the purposes of Dream Shards specifically. It can be an added bonus to the Super Luck effect, because that is nice to get an additional roughly 8,000 if you have the best sub-skills. But comparative to other Dream Shard farming options, it is like getting about half. There can be days where it feels really, really good. There's a heavy degree of variance with Honchkrow because it can proc those 20,000 shard procs, which are absolutely insane when it happens. But overall, Honchkrow's not the best Dream Shard farmer. If you want to farm Dream Shards, you should use something else. This dude just produces additional Dream Shards on the side, similarly to kind of how we think of Musharna. Although Musharna's kind of funny because, well, actually, here, let's see. If I log Musharna in here, make it level 50, I'm pretty certain it outperforms some of these skills specialists. 10,000. If I give it the best possible... This is just a random side tangent. Just for comparison's sake. Okay. It is... okay, it's about the same as a Persian. For a Musharna. And a Musharna is a berry specialist, first and foremost. So, and it produces milk as well. 20 milk versus 18 milk. It produces more milk. 11,000 berry strength versus 6,000. Look at that. Musharna is just strictly better than Persian in almost every way. Other than, I guess Persian maybe produces a little bit more berry strength if you put it at Snowdrop or if you have normal berries. But that's such a niche usage. I cannot reasonably say that Persian is worth the invest for anybody. But that aside, the next thing that I wanted to discuss is Marowak. Now, Marowak is a bit unique because if you look here, now what I consider the bare minimum investable for Berry Specialist is just having Berry Finding S and nothing else contributing to their value. Now, in this case, if we compare Swampert to Marowak, I gave Marowak the best potential subskills for individual productivity. Now, Helping Bonus can throw this off a little bit, but Helping Bonus would take up another subskill on the Marowak, and right now we only have access to 3. So it would make this technically do a little bit worse in individual productivity if I did run the calculations in a way that gave Help Bonus stacks set null. It would make this Marowak look a bit better if I gave it Helping Bonus instead. But the odds of getting Helping Bonus on this are pretty much the same as the odds of getting Helping Bonus on this as well. Actually, this has better odds. So, I wanted to just say, if we took dollar for dollar, I guess, and didn't worry about Helping Bonus because that makes things a lot more complicated, how does the comparison look? And ultimately, with Swampert versus Marowak, Marowak looks better on the surface with the ground favored berry, but that's also on the surface. Marowak's skill really doesn't contribute anything to the team at all. And Swampert, on the other hand, has Tasty Chance S, which is one of, if not the most powerful main skill in the game. It's definitely between that and all the energy for everyone variants. So, Tasty Chance, though. What is the value of it? Now, the calculator here doesn't actually do Tasty Chance a good job. The way that it calculates it is it sees it as a modifier to meal strength. By default, crits give a 1.1714 times multiplier to meal strength. So when you have it for individual analysis, the way that they calculate that in is they just make it a modifier to the Pokemon's ingredient strength, which obviously for a berry specialist, that's going to be pretty much nothing. So Swampert's main skill here is being basically completely ignored when it really shouldn't be. It really is contributing some value through that main skill, aside from just like maybe a couple extra 100 through ingredients per day. So how do we actually account for that? Meanwhile, Marowak's basically a useless skill. Well, to account for that, we can basically come up with a modifier for how beneficial this is being. Well, if we're going to do a calculation here, 1.3131, which is the way this Swampert skill is coming out to impact it, without any main skill seed investment, this is just if you run Swampert, versus running something that doesn't have Tasty Chance, it's 1.1714 is the default, we get that the Swampert's increasing meal strength by roughly 12%. Actually, just slightly above. So then, how can we actually figure that out? Well, 12% times whatever meal you're making. Let's assume that you're making like level 55, because it's a little bit more difficult to level up meals. Something that's relatively easy. Let's say you're not running good camp ticket and you're making tea time corn scones. Tea time corn scones uses Swampert's corn, so I think it's a more reasonable meal. And like I said, let's pretend that you haven't leveled it up all the way. How much strength is this really contributing? Well, 12% times the meal strength here is 29,607. Times the 12% times 3, since you have 3 meals in a day, you get an additional 10,658 strength from the Swampert's main skill here. So an extra 10,000 strength. If you had 10,600 strength to this thing comes in at 72k. And this best potential Marowak, minus help bonus being weird, is coming in weaker than the Swampert with just Berry Finding S alone when we account for that Tasty Chance contribution. Now, this may look a little bit different if you aren't a very cooking-focused player and you're making something much weaker. If you don't necessarily have level 55 meals at like a... If you don't necessarily have the strongest of meals, but this is more like a mid-tier meal, I'd say. And once again, we can also crank this up to level 65, and that changes it even more, because suddenly this is way more powerful. So there are other factors that can play in here that make Swamperts more powerful, and ways to make it less powerful, but even if you're working with some of the weakest meals, it's coming pretty close. So I wouldn't really suggest Marowak for just about any purpose, since catching a decent Swampert that can outproduce it is fairly easy to come by. Alright, so the next one that I wanted to discuss, and this one's a bit more complicated because I actually have to use a different tool. But when it comes to energy recovery, now, Energy for Everyone and Energizing Cheer are two main skills in the game, and they do kind of the same thing, but if you're trying to make your energy recovery or your Energizing Cheer Pokemon do the job of the Energy for Everyone Pokemon, then it's a lot more difficult to justify investing it. Now, I think they can be valuable for supplemental healing, maybe for spot healing low energy Pokemon on bad days. There might be some value in this outside of this, but if you're trying to use it as your main healer, then I don't think I can reasonably justify using Energizing Cheer as your main healer. And the reasoning why. So, if we look into this, based off of the analysis here and the energy curves, you'd see that this Wigglytuff has a 2.0968% times energy curve, versus this Slowking in Rain on X has an energy curve that represents 2.1150. It looks better. It looks better on the surface, even if we just break down how much energy they're gaining per day. 415 energy split across 5 Pokemon is more than 77.7, I believe. Let me double check that real quick. Yeah, it's 83.02. So, it's a little bit more energy on the Slowking versus the Wigglytuff. Rain on X treats it that way. However, Rain on X is not a very great tool for energy curves and for this sort of purpose specifically, because what it's doing is it's taking the average, and if you look here, and you look at the energy curve, it assumes it's just gaining a fifth of the energy every time, when that's not really a great way of representing it. There's a much better tool for this particular purpose in gaining accurate energy information, and that is Neroli's Lab. Now, I love Neroli's Lab for a multitude of reasons, but one of the reasons is because the way that it calculates this out instead is it literally runs simulations. All these Pikachus that I've put in here just for the sake of making a full team are the same. But you can see that the calculator actually says they're producing a little bit less or more to a near negligible amount. But that's because it's basically running Monte Carlo simulations of every single game mechanic. So instead of assuming an average curve, it is just letting it be random and then taking the average of those thousands of simulations that it's run and showing you the results of that. Which means that for energy simulations, it actually does a significantly better job at accurately reflecting how the healer is going to impact the team. And in this case, I did the same sort of simulation with a bare minimum investment Wigglytuff, which is the weakest of the Energy for Everyone healers, by the way. And I compared that to the best possible Slowking, like I did in Rain on X. And when you make that comparison, the team overall, now I did throw these guys on there just to have some sort of side productivity, targets to heal, because that does make a big difference, obviously. 870k on this bare minimum investable Wigglytuff versus 867k on what is effectively the best potential Slowking. So, in the end, it looks like the best possible Slowking can't even outperform a bare minimum Wigglytuff, which is the weakest of the Energy for Everyone healers. And then furthermore, I also, just for one extra side comparison, for anyone out there that is in favor of a particular mon that we'll get to soon, this is the bare minimum investable Slowking. If I compare that to the best potential Umbreon, As you can see here, the best potential Umbreon provides such weak healing to the rest of the team that this team, despite Umbreon actually itself producing significantly more strength than the Slowking, as you can see here, 105k versus 89.2k, the hit taken from the rest of the team gaining less energy because it's an Umbreon instead of an actual healer makes it so that the bare minimum on Energizing Cheer outperforms Umbreon's Moonlight, even though Umbreon procs a heck of a lot more and keeps itself energized. So overall, I can't really justify using Energizing Cheer as the main source of healing, which is interesting, because that's the way that I've run it on the sleepers. But to anyone that has access to energy for everyone, it's such an overpowered and dominant centralizing skill that if you want to play this game optimally and don't want to put a roadblock in your own path intentionally, like I've done with the sleepers, then just use energy for everyone. It is the core, it is the cornerstone of team building in this game that you have a good energy for everyone healer. And trying to throw that off, even with like expert mode, I don't see this being a worthwhile investment when this good of subskills can't make up the difference between just something that's bare minimum. So, and Umbreon, really, don't consider Umbreon. At least I can say there's a bit more of a reason to invest in Umbreon than a Persian, because Persian just is so bad that, and I can't think of a use for it. Umbreon, on the other hand, I can think of one use, and that is if you want to make a true all-dark type team for Darkrai, then Umbreon is the only dark type healer. Although, at that point, Umbreon's healing is so unreliable, I question if it's worth it to even run it, or if it'd be better to just run another Houndoom, or some other Dark-type Pokemon that's going to provide more value in some other way. Because Umbreon just, it can't keep up the healing. In fact, if we look at how much healing the team's getting from each one, it's 27.8 energy. That's next to no energy gained per day from the Umbreon's healing. So that's less than a single proc of Energizing Cheer. So I really can't justify an Umbreon. Now, the final thing that I wanted to discuss. Now, these are... Before I get into this, these ones don't quite meet the threshold, but they're kind of honorable mentions. And that is ABB Pokemon that are placed up against really, really good Pokemon within their particular ingredient. Now, some of these species are not bad. In fact, they're relatively good Pokemon. You'll see that Skeledirge and Clodsar are placed on here. They're not bad for their A ingredient, but comparatively, they are almost across this threshold of being, like, Subskills don't trump species with the ABB list for their main ingredient. So if you stumble into these Pokemon, if you stumble into this Sausage Skeledirge while hunting for an Apple Skeledirge, and you find something else for apples, maybe this could be worth the investment if you need something for sausages still. Because it does slightly outperform what I consider bare minimum on Aggron. Now, bare minimum on mono ingredient specialists, I put as just ingredient finder M because there is the added rarity of the ingredient list. So I think this is more what I consider bare minimum for them, just based off of my own vibes and feelings after playing the game. If you want to do rarity analysis, let me know in the comments what you find with rarity analysis. This is probably actually rarer than the Skill Trigger M Help Speed M, if I had to guess. But anyway, if we compare Coffee here, it's pretty much... Best potential Clodsar is basically the same, only ever slightly better than Ingredient Finding M Mono Vikavolt. Comfey, now this is the one I really wouldn't recommend, because this is going to be a pain to level, probably worse to level than Tyranitar, honestly, despite being, not having a worse energy curve, just because of availability of candy. But ABB Comfey only outproduces Tyranitar's Ginger productivity by around 5 per day, with the best possible subskills versus bare minimum. And then Sausage on Skeledirge is a little bit more of it's a better comparison than these other ones are, but it's still only slightly better, within a range that I'd say you'd have to really stumble into the perfect Sausage Skeledirge for it to be worth your consideration. And this is probably the case with Toxicroak as well. I didn't even run it for Toxicroak, but I know that he also can produce sausage. And the thing about these ones is it's not necessarily that they're bad Pokemon, it's that there are better things they can be doing with the resources that they have. Okay, Toxicroak is one that even the ABB list does not outproduce bare minimum investable Aggron because it's 102. So, I guess I wouldn't recommend Toxicroak for sausage. But Toxicroak for oil, great. Skeledirge for apples, great. Clodsire for cacao, great. Comfake for corn, if you stumble into it, it's okay, but it's still not great. Anyway, that is about it for today's video. So if you have enjoyed the discussion about these particular Pokemon, when subskills don't trump species, then be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Down in the description, we'll have a link to join the Discord. You can come join us, hang out, talk about all things Pokemon, sleep, and the like. A huge thank you to all my channel members. It really means a lot to me that you guys want to show your support financially, despite there being no paid rewards for members. If you too want to become a channel member, then feel free to click that join button down below. And as always, I thank you all for watching and hope that you all have a wonderful day. Bye-bye now.